I didn't expect the coat to feel heavier this year. The wool had thinned around the cuffs, but something about the weight across my shoulders made it harder to pull straight. I had hung it near the door the night before, thinking it might be too warm for late March, but still wanting to wear something that had once felt like presents. The basket was already packed. Pear jam in 2 small jars ribboned at the lid. A bottle of red wine with a label that had the word Legacy in cursive. And 1 linen napkin I had stitched weeks ago with 2 initials, now half concealed in folded cotton. It had taken me 3 tries to get the embroidery smooth. The left heel of my shoe caught the corner of the rug as I bent down. I leaned against the wall to pull it on, careful the way one learns after a certain birthday. The plastic phone case buzzed on the table, just as I reached for the second shoe. I didn't have to check the name. His voice arrived before the room caught up. "We've been thinking." There was a small shuffle of sound behind him, like a drawer or a coat zipper. "About today? Look, Kimberly thinks maybe just for this one you sit it out." The ribbon on the basket had curled slightly in the warmth of the kitchen. I twisted one end with my finger. "It's not that we don't want you there, it's just..." The crowd's a little more formal, mostly her firm. Media folks, couple of board members. We're trying to keep a certain energy. The coat remained draped over the chair behind me. Its sleeves had collapsed inward. One of the buttons was loose. I'd meant to fix that. You know how people can be. Everything's image now. It's exhausting. I pressed my hand on the countertop, not firmly. I mean, let's be honest. These events, they're not really your scene, right? Loud music, flashy people, everyone on their phones. You don't need that. I could still hear him breathing. Not rushed, not hesitant, just prepared. "We figured we'd do something smaller with you next week. Maybe dinner here, or brunch. The kids would love that." A drawer shut on his end. I imagine the way Kimberly closes kitchen cabinets, never slams, just lets them shut themselves. "Anyway, I knew you'd understand." Kimberly says thank you. The line disconnected without needing a goodbye. I stood for a moment with one shoe still in my hand. The other was near the rug. The coat, the basket, the ribbon, the napkin, all of it still in place. All of it now meant for no one. The kettle hadn't been used yet that day. I filled it half full, lit the burner, and placed it where it had always gone. The handle squeaked faintly as it settled. The mug I chose had a crack through the glaze, though it didn't leak. Blue trim almost faded. Harold's hand had left a slight wear mark where the handle met the cup. His ring had clicked there once. I never scrubbed it off. The tea leaves dropped in without ceremony. No sugar. While it steeped, I unwrapped the basket. The ribbon coiled back on itself. I didn't retie it. The jam went into the cabinet behind the tin of crackers I no longer buy. The wine into the bottom drawer beside the corkscrew we used once last year. The napkin I left folded on the table edge, slightly frayed. The phone lit again. A message. One photo. A table dressed in white. Gold-rimmed glasses. Candles. Faces turned towards someone raising a toast, Travis in a blazer I hadn't seen before. Kimberly flawless as always. Her parents near the center. Her younger brother back from Boston. Someone had typed the caption in bold. "The Hargroves Elegant Strong United." No mention, no sign. Not even a place setting out of order. I turned the phone face down. The tea had gone cold by the time I remembered it was still there. I sipped anyway. A thread had pulled loose from the napkin. I picked it gently, but it didn't come free. I folded the cloth in half again and placed it beside the cup. The coat hadn't moved. I reached for it, fixed the loose button by tucking it under, and laid it across the back of the chair. The sleeves curled inward as if to hold something. The table felt larger that morning, as if the room had widened without gaining space. Harold once told me that the cruelest sound in any house was not shouting, not doors slamming, but someone talking about you in past tense while you're still in the room. He said it without looking at me years ago, as he stirred sugar into his coffee and folded the paper with perfect lines. I never asked him what he meant. The basket sat open, no longer tied. I left it that way. I didn't know the exact moment I stopped being invited, but I recognized the silence that followed. I used to believe that if I softened enough, I might fit into the empty spaces they left for me. The photo sat in the side drawer under a stack of warranties and appliance manuals. I had placed it there sometime after the party folded once so it wouldn't crease the faces. Lila stood between the balloon arch and the tiered cupcakes with pink frosting, one shoe untied. Kimberly's arm stretched protectively across her daughter's shoulders, perfectly positioned, elbow tucked. Travis held a sparkler behind them, smiling at someone out of frame. I had made the lemon cake that day. No one touched it. A tray of branded cupcakes had arrived from a downtown bakery just to add color, Kimberly had said. The cake came home with me. It sat in the fridge until the frosting cracked. I cut it into uneven slices and froze them 2 at a time. I stopped checking if anyone would ask for a piece. Later that week, a padded envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a thank you card printed with gold script and an unused gift card to a coffee chain I'd never been to. The handwriting on the envelope wasn't Travis's. I bought an iPad last year, not the newest model. I spent an hour at the store learning the difference. The salesman called me ma'am 3 times and smiled like I was borrowing time. I downloaded 2 video call apps and made sure the screen brightness didn't hurt my eyes. I practiced positioning it on the shelf beside the kettle. No one called. Once I sent Lila a sticker of a birthday cat wearing a crown. She liked it. That was the only notification I kept. The battery drains faster now, but I leave it charging beside the chair anyway, just in case. At New Year's, I gave them a card with a reservation to a place I saw on their social media. Kimberly handed it back gently without opening the envelope. We're cutting back. Detox month. She smiled with her lips only. It's sweet, though. I carried it home between folded gloves. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, I wore a red cardigan Harold had chosen for me on our anniversary. Kimberly pulled me aside in the hallway. Mauve or navy might blend better with the table setup, she said, placing her manicured fingers on my sleeve. Just so we don't clash in photos. The next year, I wore gray. My knees have a rhythm of their own now. Most mornings, I sit at the edge of the bed and count to 5 before trying to stand. There's a bottle in the cabinet with a yellow cap and a warning label that tells me not to drive too soon after taking one. I keep it in the back row behind the sea salt and turmeric. When they come over, I close the cabinet entirely. I don't mention the tingling in my fingers. I open jars before anyone arrives. I replace light bulbs during daylight so I won't have to ask. I have a step stool with rubber feet, but I only use it when no one's home. They don't know that I still shovel the front walk myself, even if I do it in sections now. No one has ever asked me if I needed help. I've never asked. The pension deposits arrive on the same day each month. I keep a notebook with each amount logged, checked in blue pen. Harold used to do it in black. I started using blue so I'd know which were mine. The total hasn't changed in years. Rent goes up. Groceries shift. The numbers still meet, but sometimes only just. I gave Owen a check for his camp last summer. Travis returned it folded neatly in thirds. We're trying to teach the kids self-reliance. Then he kissed my temple like a pat on the head. We appreciate the thought. The check went back in the drawer. I bought Lila a set of fabric markers last Christmas. They sat unopened on the console table all evening. Kimberly handed them to me on the way out. She's grown out of this phase. Then added with a soft laugh, "Next time, just ask." I stopped choosing things on my own after that. There's a sweater I wear only inside the house now, cream-colored pilled at the elbow, a small stain near the collar that doesn't come out. Harold once said it looked like something his mother would have worn gently and with care. Kimberly once said it made me look tired. I still fold it with care. Travis used to call on Fridays. I didn't always answer on the first ring, just to give myself a moment. Eventually, the calls moved to Sunday evenings. Then text messages. Then short responses with a period at the end. Sometimes no punctuation at all. The absence of a question felt louder than any silence. Kimberly texted once in April. "Mom, you should try updating your wardrobe a bit. Think light, breezy, less traditional." That message stayed on my screen longer than the weather. I tried. I really did. I bought a blouse with a bold pattern and wore it to their anniversary brunch. It stayed under my coat all afternoon. No one noticed. They changed the dining chairs last year. Sleek, low-backed modern. Mine wobbled slightly when I sat. Kimberly mentioned something mid-meal. "We're thinking of downsizing soon. Less clutter, streamlined." She poured wine without looking at me. "Might be time to think about where everything fits." I nodded. My fork didn't touch the potatoes. Back home, I opened the drawer near the sink and found the embroidered napkin I had started for their anniversary, the one with the date stitched in white thread. I hadn't finished the edges yet. I placed it back in the box under the dish towels. I thought if I made myself small enough, there'd be space left for me. But I may have folded too far, so far they forgot I was ever whole. Some things fade quietly, not because they lose meaning, but because no one calls them by name anymore. I opened the wooden box with the loose hinge. The inside still smelled faintly of lavender, though the sachet tucked in the corner had gone brittle. I kept the box near the back of the closet behind scarves I no longer wore and a coat I couldn't part with. I had started keeping things there years ago without realizing it. A photograph folded in half corners bent. A program from Travis's high school recital. One place card from a dinner I was never seated at. The envelope on top was cream-colored, the seal unbroken. I remembered placing it there when the Christmas cards came in last year. It was addressed to the Hargrove family. Inside a printed message in silver ink, wishing joy, health, prosperity. Beneath that, Travis, Kimberly, Owen, Lila. No space, no comma, no mention of anyone else. The handwriting was neat. It wasn't Travis's. I kept the card, but only because of the drawing. On the back, Lila had scribbled a crooked table with 2 mugs and what looked like a teapot hovering midair. Grandma's tea time was written above it in shaky marker lines. It was the only part in color. At Travis's wedding, the microphone had passed from one guest to another, like a bottle of something strong. People stood and toasted memories. Kimberly's mother spoke of her daughter's kindness. Her father read a poem. A cousin recited a story from college that made everyone laugh. When the MC listed parents to thank, my name didn't come up. I was there in the second row beside the floral archway. I held a handkerchief folded 4 times in my palm. The ring on my left hand had twisted slightly. I fixed it by habit. Someone leaned toward me during the toast. "Your dress is very simple." Understated. She smiled as if it were a compliment. I kept my hands folded for the rest of the evening. When I retired, there was no gathering. I left the office with a small plant and a mug that read, "It's handled in cursive." A coworker gave me a card with a joke about crossword puzzles in Florida. I smiled, then walked home without opening it. Kimberly's birthday came 2 months later. The family rented a cabin resort in the mountains, all wood and wine glasses. The photos showed matching sweaters and a cake too large for the table. There was a caption about celebrating strength, ambition, and beauty. I pressed like. Then I muted the thread. A certificate poked out of the stack near the bottom of the box. It was from 2002, framed at the time, with gold trim and a plastic cover. Merit Scholarship Award, Travis Hargrove. I had added the matting myself, using a blade that dulled halfway through. It had hung in the hallway near the kitchen until the last renovation. They didn't ask to take it when they moved. One article sat near the center. Folded once a soft crease through the headline, "My Mother, the Woman of Quiet Strength." A small local magazine had published it after Harold passed. I wrote it over 3 nights, not intending for anyone to read. The editor called it timeless. I mailed a copy to Travis. Weeks later, during lunch, he touched my wrist lightly. "Maybe don't bring up things like that anymore. It's better when older folks stay out of the spotlight." His voice was smooth. People admire silence more than sentimentality. The copy disappeared. I never saw it again. I stopped writing after that. There was once a scrapbook filled with Lila's first drawings. The early ones had wild colors and uncertain limbs, stick figures with big eyes and crooked hair. One page had a figure in a blue dress beside a teacup. Lila had handed it to me during a visit and whispered, "This one's you." Her breath had smelled like cinnamon. Later that year, Kimberly brought over a portfolio of Lila's new art, more refined, clean lines, digital entries. "We're trying to guide her toward things with structure," she said. She turned the page. Less of that grandmother nostalgia. I didn't mention the drawer where I'd kept the old picture. I had trimmed the edges and taped the back to make it lie flat. I found it again now, tucked behind a coaster with a faded lighthouse. The drawing had lost some of its brightness, but the outline was clear. I placed it on the table next to the tea tin. The chair beside mine at the family brunch last summer remained empty. Someone told me it was meant for the photographer. He never showed up. No one moved the chair. I sat beside it, refilling my own glass, never pouring too high. Later, I saw the group photo cropped tightly, just enough to cut off the edge of my sleeve. One year for Mother's Day, I received a group gift, a scented candle, pale green, unopened. The tag read, "Best ever," with no name. I used it once, then stored it near the back of the cabinet. The wax had settled unevenly, leaning slightly to one side. I placed the magazine article back into the box, but kept the child's drawing on the table. There were no edges to adjust. It didn't need a frame to be remembered. I stayed visible only where a child's marker had traced me, and maybe that was enough. Trust doesn't usually vanish in a single blow. It gets misplaced in small increments like teaspoons disappearing from the drawer. I had walked into this bank with a folder and a pen I didn't like. The grip had worn down from years of sitting untouched. I'd planned to ask about moving the retirement account to a fixed interest plan. It seemed prudent. Harold and I had once reviewed rates together over breakfast, marking things with check marks and arrows. The woman behind the glass screen asked for my identification, then clicked through her screen with 2 fingers. Her eyes flicked once, twice. She leaned forward slightly. "The account has already been updated. The listed managing authority is Travis Hargrove." Her voice didn't change. The word "updated" felt like the soft fall of a stone down a well. I didn't remember any update. I hadn't signed anything. I didn't use the kind of email they mentioned. "Authorization confirmed electronically," she said, as if that clarified everything. I took the printout home without looking at it until I was alone. The lines were clean and personal. The term "non-reversible transfer of authority" appeared near the top, above a signature that curved too neatly. Not my signature. It mimicked my name, but lacked the hesitation between Pauline and the last letter of my last name, something even I couldn't correct after arthritis set in. I sat at the kitchen table where the light from the window barely reached in the afternoons. The ring I wore from Harold's last Christmas gift tapped once against the edge of the paper as I shifted it. I picked it up again, just to hear that sound repeat. The phone vibrated near the kettle. I waited. When the tone faded, I opened the call log. "Don't worry so much. It's all easier to manage this way," Travis had said. "It's not a big deal. You weren't doing much with it, and I've got more to keep track of. Kimberly handles this sort of thing all the time for her parents." I hadn't asked about Kimberly's parents. "You've got the place, your tea, your little routines. Let me take care of the grown-up stuff, okay?" My hand reached for the envelope drawer, not to look for anything specific, just to feel the resistance of paper against my fingers. In the back where Harold used to file banknotes, I found a sheet with his handwriting. A table of savings goals for after 65 dated in his slanted print. None of the numbers lined up anymore. The retirement account balance read $184,620. The line beneath that managing agent, Travis Hargrove. I opened a file folder near the bookshelf. It contained a series of forms, most of them photocopies. One stood out. It bore my name, my supposed consent, and a signature identical to the one on the bank form. I pressed the tip of my finger to the page and let it rest there. Nothing moved. I turned it over and back again, as if a second look might reveal the moment it had changed. The kitchen clock clicked, not quite aligned with the second hand. I had meant to replace it, but I never liked new clocks. They didn't sound right. I found the notebook where Harold logged tax filings. The spine had cracked long ago. On one of the later pages, Travis's handwriting appeared in blue ink, a list of passwords and accounts. That was the spring he helped me file electronically. I remembered sitting across from him while he typed, smiling in that half-patient way. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of everything. You just sit back." I had. He'd used my laptop once, connected it to a hotspot, entered things I didn't ask about. I had watched the top of his head as he leaned forward, his shoulders squared. There was no pause, no asking. "Let's just keep things simple," he'd muttered at one point. "That generation likes too many complications." I never replied. I was measuring sugar into a jar at the time. The spoon was one I kept from Harold's mother, slightly tarnished. It made a soft scrape against the glass. At some point, I had stopped logging into the account. The passwords changed. There was always a reason: security updates, new platform, joint access only. I didn't push back. Now the folder with Harold's handwriting sat slightly open, exposing names of banks that no longer matched. The forms bore new seals. My name appeared only as an earlier holder. There was no evidence of theft, nothing missing in the legal sense, just a quiet transfer of everything meant for old age into someone else's hands. I ran a cloth over the kitchen counter, then smoothed it over the lid of the tea tin. I didn't drink the tea. I just liked the sound of the lid clicking into place. The phone lit up again, a message. "Want us to help sell the condo? It'll streamline things if we centralize finances." I didn't respond. The drawer beside the stove held receipts. Not because I tracked spending, but because Harold always did. The ink had started fading. A receipt from 1987 groceries, a fan, and a rose-shaped pin I once wore to a dinner party where no one remembered my name. I placed the folder back into the cabinet. Nothing was taken, nothing screamed, just the knowledge that what I had built quietly over 40 years now moved without asking under someone else's name, with someone else's reasoning. He didn't take the money. He took the safety I'd spent half a lifetime building. I didn't plan it. Not exactly. But I had been moving towards silence for some time. The locksmith came in a beige van. I watched from the window, one hand resting on the back of the chair Harold used to prefer long ago. The van idled for a moment before he stepped out, toolbox in hand. Polite nod, no questions. I opened the door and simply said, "Only one key." He worked quickly. I folded the laundry I'd left in the basket, a pale blue blouse, a towel with a bleach mark, a pair of socks I'd mended more than once. He handed me the key when he finished. Shiny brass, still warm. I didn't thank him. I nodded and closed the door behind him with care. The chipped ceramic tray where Travis used to toss his keys now held nothing. I wiped it down and placed it inside a drawer. There was no need to leave anything visible that didn't belong anymore. I pulled out the red accordion folder I hadn't touched since last spring. The tabs were still in Harold's handwriting, all in uppercase: insurance deed, IRA pension. I traced each letter with my thumb, then opened to the section marked Power of Attorney. The document had Travis's name printed cleanly beneath mine. The signature was mine too, not forged, not coerced, just given once in good faith. I folded it into thirds and placed it in the shredder tray without ceremony. The machine hummed quietly as the paper disappeared. I looked at my own name on an older will. Next to it, Harold had once written in pencil, "Stronger than she knows." I hadn't noticed that before. At the bank, the line was long. A toddler whined behind me while his mother scrolled her phone. I stepped forward when called and handed the clerk a typed request to remove all financial proxies' power of attorney and secondary access from my accounts. She glanced at it, then typed, then looked back at me and said, "All right, Ms. Hargrove. No questions. No emotion. Just process." I visited the notary across the street afterward. He stamped the new authorization papers without remark. The room smelled faintly of toner and lemon cleaner. I noticed a crack in the tile under his chair that mirrored one near my own pantry. Back home, I brewed tea in the small pot with the chipped spout. It still poured evenly. I set it next to a plain white mug, not the one Travis gave me. That one had been moved to a high shelf weeks ago. Later, I typed the message on my laptop. I reread it twice. "You don't need to manage my accounts anymore, nor keep my house key. I signed only my name, no mom." I clicked send, then turned the laptop off without waiting for the ping of response. The reply came that evening. The preview line showed only a few words. "I'm sorry if you misunderstood." I opened it anyway. "I'm sorry if you misunderstood. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be." There was no greeting, no name. I deleted it without responding. I pulled the curtain closed in the living room, the side with the fraying tieback. I'd meant to replace it for years. Now I left it as is. I stood still for a moment, holding the fabric, then let it fall. The next day, I called Frank Whitlow. He had been Harold's attorney and a man of few words. I asked him if he could meet me at home. When he arrived, he carried a small briefcase and a pen clipped to the front pocket of his jacket. I showed him the stack of papers I'd gathered: retirement statements, insurance policies, a copy of the original house deed. He reviewed everything without commentary. I watched his eyes scan the signature lines. At one point, he paused, looked at the outdated authorization with Travis's name, and asked, "Do you want to revoke it fully?" I nodded once. He adjusted his glasses, clicked the pen, and began drafting the replacement. I signed in silence. The pen bled slightly through the paper. Before he left, he looked at me for a long moment. "Do you want to add a new contact?" I shook my head. After he left, I placed the new documents into a new folder. Blue. Clean. I didn't label it. I would remember what was in it without needing tabs. I walked through the house with slow steps. I took down the photograph in the hallway, the one from Travis's wedding, and placed it inside a drawer with the batteries and unopened Christmas cards. I didn't frame new memories. I simply allowed old ones to rest. By late afternoon, I brewed another pot of tea. I used the stove kettle instead of the electric one. It took longer, but I liked the sound it made. I poured the tea and didn't sweeten it. Then I locked the front door, not from fear, not to shut anyone out, just to remind myself I could. I sat in the chair by the window, the one Kimberly once said looked dated, but sweet. I didn't change the cushion cover. It held a small threadbare patch that reminded me of Harold's coat lining. I didn't think of what to say next. There was nothing to explain. There was nothing to prove. There was only the sound of the door bolt clicking and the stillness after. And I knew without anyone needing to agree that I didn't have to be claimed to be complete. I thought the quiet might echo too loudly. The apartment wasn't large. The windows faced a back alley with crooked fence posts and power lines, but the sunlight still found its way in. I unpacked slowly, folding each thing as though I were placing it into someone else's hands. The kettle came first, then the chipped teacup, the one with the faint crack at the handle. It hadn't held anyone else's lips but mine for years, but somehow it felt different here. I bought a used table at the weekend market. It wobbled slightly, but the man selling it told me if you turn the leg a bit clockwise, it finds its balance. I carried it up 2 flights, one step at a time, resting midway when the heat caught my chest. No one offered help. That was new. It wasn't bad. I chose a soft gray curtain from the thrift shop. It had a faint coffee stain at the bottom, like someone had spilled while holding on to a story. I hemmed it anyway and hung it without measuring. The fold wasn't even. I left it that way. The first night I turned my phone face down and unplugged the landline. No one called, but I didn't want to wait for it. I made toast at 10 p.m. and watched steam rise from the butter without thinking about cholesterol charts or grocery coupons. No one asked if I'd remembered the almond milk. There was only one shelf in the fridge, and it held what I liked. The grocery store near the corner smelled of citrus and onions. The cashier had a birthmark on his wrist, shaped like a teardrop. I didn't ask his name. I noticed his hands folded receipts neatly. That felt like enough for now. The books I brought were the ones I hadn't loaned out and never got back. I arranged them by the year I first read them, not by size or color. One had a yellowed receipt stuck inside 2 gallons of gas and a packet of gum from 1996. I smoothed it out and used it as a bookmark again. There were no pictures on the wall, only one sketch drawn years ago by a small hand that once wrote Grandma's tea time in purple crayon. I hadn't taped it anywhere in the old house. Here, I placed it above the kettle beside the light switch. It made sense there. Sometimes I woke before sunrise and sat on the edge of the bed without moving. I listened to pipes groan in the ceiling and counted the pause between 2 clicks from the thermostat. My name wasn't on anyone's lips. No one downstairs called for me to find socks or sign anything. It was strange not to be needed. Then it became quiet. Then it became mine. I walked to the park in the mornings. There was a man who fed pigeons at the far bench. He wore 2 watches. One of them no longer ticked. We nodded once. I kept walking. At the bakery nearby, I bought a small sourdough roll. The woman at the counter called it the ugly one and gave it to me with a wink. I liked that it wasn't symmetrical. I paid in cash. She handed me the change like she was handing over something delicate. I remembered that feeling. I found the old embroidered cloth at the bottom of a moving box. I had pressed it once for someone else's celebration. It still smelled faintly of lavender from the drawer sachet. I washed it, line-dried it, and placed it under the teapot. The thread at one corner had come loose. I didn't fix it. A letter arrived one afternoon. Not from Travis, not from Kimberly. Just a generic bank form forwarded from my old address. It was addressed to primary account holder. No name. I read it twice, then tore it once through the center and placed it in the bin. I kept a folded piece of paper on my nightstand. A note Harold had left me years ago. Don't forget to pick up the cinnamon. It was written in pencil, curved and hurried. I never framed it. I never threw it away. It was the last list anyone ever trusted me to complete. The neighbor upstairs played jazz after 10 p.m. I didn't mind. The rhythm reminded me of the sound Travis used to make when he drummed his fingers waiting for me to finish telling a story. At the pharmacy, the young man with the barcode scanner asked if I needed help with the prescription app. I told him I'd manage. He smiled without correcting me. That felt generous. I stopped checking the mailbox daily. Nothing urgent was arriving. I realized slowly I'd been living as if everything required urgency, as if my presence depended on my usefulness. No one asked for casseroles or account numbers now. No one knocked to borrow time. I began to walk without my phone. I left it in the drawer for hours. Once I found 4 missed calls, 2 from an unknown number, 1 from Kimberly, 1 without a name. I didn't return any of them. If it mattered, they would write. If it didn't, I already knew. The apartment didn't need decorating. It needed breathing space. I stopped making lists. I folded towels however they came from the dryer. I used the chipped mug again, the one no one liked but me. At night, I boiled water, poured it over loose tea, and held the cup with both hands. I sat by the window legs tucked under and looked at nothing in particular. The curtains swayed. The room stayed quiet. No demands, no alarms, no door opening with assumptions. I wasn't waiting to be restored. I wasn't holding space anymore. I taped the sketch from Lila higher on the wall. It wrinkled slightly at one edge but stayed in place. Here, I'm not a placeholder. Here, I'm not a burden. Here I am. I used to believe silence meant peace. Lately, I've learned it can also mean preparation. I hadn't heard from either of them in weeks. Not since I changed the locks, not since the keys stopped circulating in drawers they never opened. Then one morning my phone lit up with a name I had nearly stopped recognizing. Kimberly. The name alone used to make my shoulders straighten. This time I simply watched it blink. Travis and I were reviewing the deed to the old house, her voice through the line, distant yet exact. You haven't transferred it back to us. That wasn't part of the plan, was it? I stood at the window, one hand resting on the tea kettle I hadn't yet boiled. I sold it, I replied. 6 weeks ago. The pause didn't surprise me. Then the tone sharpened. You didn't think to talk to Travis first. I didn't answer. The line went dead. Moments later, it rang again. This time, Travis's voice, no hesitation. You sold the house without even telling me. I didn't realize I needed to. My voice didn't lift. It was never in your name. Silence again, but heavier. I could almost hear him adjusting his tie, inhaling through his teeth, the way he did as a boy when someone beat him at chess. Then the sentence I knew would come. You should have consulted your family. That word again, family. A word they only remembered when something needed explaining or undoing or reclaiming. Later that afternoon, I found a message on my email. Kimberly again. For the holidays, we're coordinating a family feature in the magazine, just a short piece. We'd need a group photo. It would mean a lot if you showed up. There was a line break, then the words, just for the image. Not for the warmth or the conversation or the meal, just for the image. Just long enough to stand in the background, smile without saying anything, and disappear before dessert. I closed the laptop and wiped the lens of my glasses. A speck of dust had clung to the edge of the right frame. I thought about the last time I had been in one of their photos. My eyes had been half closed, and Kimberly had cropped me out before posting it. The next week, a letter arrived by courier, a single embossed envelope with my name in a font I didn't use. The sender was a law office downtown. Not the kind I used to walk by, but the kind that sits behind tinted windows. I opened it slowly, blade slicing the edge in one clean motion. Discussion of unresolved property matters, attempt to reach mutual understanding, request for conversation regarding remaining estate items. I placed the letter beside the coaster, the one with the chipped corner I never replaced. The ceramic edge nudged the paper just enough to crease it. I didn't call. I didn't write back. I waited 2 days, then found a single envelope of my own. I pulled out the old fountain pen Harold once used for Christmas cards and wrote on a blank card I'd saved from a gift long returned. I no longer participate in family arrangements. Best of luck. No signature, just my handwriting, small, legible, and final. The day after I mailed it, I went through my drawer and found the deed transfer. The sale had gone smoothly. No fanfare, no candles lit for goodbye, just my initials on the dotted line and a check that now sat quietly in my retirement account. I remembered something Kimberly once told a friend over brunch, not knowing I was within earshot. Travis's mother is harmless, quiet. You wouldn't even notice if she weren't there. She wasn't wrong. They hadn't noticed. They noticed now. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled down an old album, one they never asked to see. Inside were pictures of Travis on his first day of school, his hand clutching the lunchbox I sewed from scraps of corduroy. Kimberly wasn't in those photos. Neither was anyone else from her side. Just me, him, and the bare walls of a small apartment we'd once shared while Harold worked double shifts. I flipped to the last page where an unused sleeve remained empty. I slid the law firm's letter inside, not out of bitterness, just as a marker. A few days later, another message arrived, this time via voicemail. We can work something out. It doesn't have to be a legal battle. No one wants to make this ugly. They already had. The voicemail continued, words pressing forward, like a tide trying to reclaim sand. Mama, just call me back. Please. No one had called me Mama in 10 years. I didn't call back. I made oatmeal instead. I stirred slowly, counting the turns of the spoon as if they were years. When the oatmeal cooled, I poured it into 2 small jars, one for breakfast, one for tomorrow, a habit I'd picked up from no one in particular. That night I received one more email, a PDF attached. Proposed terms for shared access to any remaining funds. No greeting, no warmth, just bullet points, charts, clauses. I pressed delete. Then I opened a different file, an old scanned recipe from my mother's handwriting. Faded ink, barely legible, but familiar. The same one I'd once framed and hung near the kitchen before they said it made the space look too rustic. I printed it again, this time on linen paper. I pinned it near the kettle. A knock came the next afternoon. I didn't answer. The peephole showed no familiar face, only a courier. Another letter. I left it on the floor until evening. I made tea. The smell of lemon balm rose gently through the room. The chipped mug warmed my hands. Across from me, the small table held nothing but a book I'd already finished, and the envelope I chose not to open. Somewhere they were likely planning another call, another angle, another strategy. But here I heard only the kettle winding down the last curl of steam and the quiet space I had carved without permission. Not peace exactly, but enough. I never thought the silence could feel so full. I held a pen between my fingers, the old silver one Harold used for checks, now worn where his thumb had rested. It didn't glide the way newer pens do, but it scratched paper honestly, without pretense. I used it to label the inside of a donated law book with my own careful handwriting, community copy. Do not resell. The library hadn't asked for help cataloging the donation, but I offered anyway. I liked things with spines and weight. I trusted books more than most people now. A voice I didn't recognize said, "Are you the one who flagged the forged documents in the Hendricks case?" "My Aunt Darlene works at the firm. They still talk about you." I looked up. A girl no older than 25, hair in a messy knot blazer too big, stood by the bench. A chipped badge read, "Natalie P.," with a laminated sticker peeling off. She smiled like she hadn't been told to be polite, just wanted to be. I nodded once, then returned to straightening the pile. She didn't linger. I hadn't told anyone at the legal aid office who I used to be. Not a mother, not a homeowner, not someone who used to bake carrot cake from scratch, because a daughter-in-law mentioned it offhand. They didn't ask. They saw what I carried now, not what had been taken. My desk was near the copy machine next to a young paralegal who always left her lunch receipts behind. I'd fold them neatly and leave them by her keyboard. She once told me, "You keep this place from collapsing." Then she laughed, thinking it a joke. My days moved in straight lines. No one asked what time I'd be home. No one rearranged my groceries or reminded me to forward emails. I washed my own tea mug and set it down on the rack upside down so it wouldn't drip. The small acts stacked like bricks. They made a shape I could live inside. At the co-op market, I now greeted the baker by name. Marco always gave me the end pieces no one bought. I never said no. I liked the crust. It reminded me that being overlooked sometimes left you with the most flavor. Someone once asked if I missed being part of a household. I answered I used to live with people and still felt alone. Now I live alone, and I know who sits across from me at dinner. It's me. I never expected that to be enough. And yet it was. On Tuesday, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside a letter folded 4 times, like someone didn't want it to be read too quickly. The handwriting was Travis's. He mentioned stress, business troubles. He wrote about the early years fishing trips, his first apartment, how I used to iron his shirts even when he told me not to. Then almost casually, it would mean a lot if you could help with $60,000 to bridge us through this downturn. Just until things stabilize. I read it twice. Then I slipped the letter under the stack of mail I meant to recycle. No reply. That night I took out the scholarship paperwork I'd been helping file for weeks, a fund in Harold's name, earmarked for women over 50 restarting a career. I'd created the idea, typed the charter, found a small grant to launch it. I'd never thought of applying myself, but my name fit the criteria. Under intent, I wrote, "To learn how to protect what still belongs to people who get ignored." I didn't ask permission. I didn't apologize. I uploaded the form before the kettle finished boiling. The old scarf I'd once embroidered now hung in my window like a curtain, letting in soft light but keeping out eyes. It had no initials stitched anymore. I'd taken them out thread by thread. A voicemail blinked on my phone the next morning. Kimberly's voice clipped and polished. "Just wanted to check if you'd seen Travis's letter. We're really stretched. I know you understand the pressure of family obligations." No mention of last Christmas, or the house, or the paperwork I'd had to reverse to reclaim what was mine. I erased the voicemail without listening again. At lunch, Natalie stopped by my desk and handed me a coffee. Warm, not too sweet lid, snapped tight. "Thanks for the donation," she said. "My sister's starting community college. She borrowed the property law book already." I took the cup. My hands wrapped around it the way they once did around a smaller thermos, back when Travis had soccer games on Saturday mornings. That one had been blue with a plastic lid. I still remembered the scrape it made sliding into the cup holder. I didn't miss that thermos. But I remembered how carefully I used to pack it. That night I sat with a blank envelope in front of me. I wrote nothing. Just placed one of the Herald Foundation's brochures inside the one with a woman standing in front of a courthouse, smiling with her arms folded. I circled the grant section and highlighted the line, "No repayment expected. Just proof you won't give up." Then I put Travis's name on it and left it in the outgoing mail. No note, no explanation, no check. The next day, I checked my scholarship status. Approved. The woman in the photo wasn't me, not yet, but she could be. And I wasn't invisible in that office. I wasn't tolerated. I wasn't temporary. I was the person who noticed when a clause was out of date, who brought in extra file folders, who knew how to separate emotion from decision. I had become useful again, not to people who only needed me when it was convenient, but to strangers who learned my name without resenting it. That night, I brewed chamomile. I folded laundry slowly. The sleeves of my shirts no longer smelled of another person's home. I tucked the pen into my drawer alongside my application receipt. I looked at the label I'd written earlier and ran a finger over the words. Not for resale. Some things don't belong to anyone else again. Not anymore. I never liked how my last name looked on envelopes. Not when it came with bills. Not when it came with invitations. Not even when it came with legal threats. I held the pen longer than necessary at the county clerk's office. My fingers hovered above the line labeled "New Legal Name." It wasn't hesitation. It was a kind of recognition, like returning something that had never quite fit. I wrote Pauline Whitlow, the name that once belonged to the girl who wore her father's denim jacket to school, the girl who shelved books and believed people would stay if she just did enough. The clerk didn't comment, didn't ask for stories, just stamped the papers and slid them across the counter like I had ordered lunch. I folded the receipt and placed it inside a canvas folder. The same one that still held my marriage certificate. Creased, fragile, faded at the corners. I didn't throw it away. I simply placed it behind the new papers, letting it rest without authority. That afternoon, I mailed 2 envelopes. The first, addressed to the attorney of record on Travis's estate documents, contained a notarized waiver of inheritance. No commentary, no reason. Just one sentence: I decline all entitlements derived from or associated with Mr. Travis Hargrove. It felt like slicing off a name stitched onto the back of a jacket someone else kept wearing. The second envelope took longer to prepare. I sat with it for 2 nights. It was addressed to Lila Emerson, my granddaughter, though I didn't write Grandma anywhere inside. I wrote, "If one day you want to know about the woman who used to sit quietly at the edge of your birthdays, go to the public library on 8th Street. Ask for the Oral History Archive. My name is filed under Pauline Whitlow." I was interviewed once about women who rebuilt themselves. I didn't say much, but I left enough. I sealed the letter and tucked it into the envelope, pressing the flap down slowly with the heel of my hand. Not heavy, just deliberate. Back at home, I opened the wooden chest beneath my bed. I took out a bundle of keepsakes wrapped in tissue, the glass swan Travis made in 7th grade, Kimberly's old Christmas ornament, with the year painted in gold, the teacup I had saved from the day Lila first poured milk into it without spilling. I had kept them all, not because they held meaning anymore, but because they once did. I packed everything into a donation box except one thing: a cloth napkin. Embroidered, pale green. It had been meant for someone. I no longer remembered who. It simply stayed. I folded it neatly and placed it inside a small envelope marked "For the Library Memory Box." The woman at the front desk of the library didn't ask why I brought it. She opened the box labeled "Donated Artifacts" and gently placed the napkin inside, right above a hand-sewn baby bib and a journal entry titled "Letter to the Mother I Never Sent." I didn't look back as I walked out. That night I made tea with the last of the peppermint leaves. The cup had no saucer. I held it with both hands and sat still. There were no phone calls, no notifications, no footsteps outside my door. Just the faint tick of the old wall clock and the whistle of a neighbor's kettle. A name isn't just a name. It's a container, a label, a claim. For years, I lived under a name that offered shelter in public and silence in private. Hargrove was the name they kept using when speaking over me, the name that always appeared under legal documents I was expected to sign, but never to read. The name they remembered when they needed signatures, but not on holidays. That name was no longer mine. The mirror didn't change. My hands didn't either. But there was something sharper in the way I refolded my clothes now. My initials on the laundry tag meant something again. I had once been wife, then mother, then forgotten figure. Now I was simply Pauline. Not short for anything. Not belonging to anyone. No one called. No one wrote. That, too, was its own kind of peace. I still walked to the market on Tuesdays. Still nodded to Mr. Armando at the corner stand, who always handed me an extra lemon. Still left the porch light on, not for someone coming, but because I liked how it softened the hallway. I never spoke about the name change to anyone at the legal aid office. I didn't need them to know. The file folder in my drawer now had one label, PW. The other initials in red ink had been scratched out. Not torn, just erased. They once taught us that identity was what people remembered of us. But I've learned it's more often what we refuse to carry. I no longer need to prove who I am. I only need to keep walking without the names that once made me smaller. I stopped waiting to be remembered. That realization came not like thunder, but like steam lifting off a chipped mug. The handle of the kettle was warm beneath my palm. I poured just enough for 1 cup, careful not to let the water rise too high. I used the same mug I'd once hidden at the back of the cabinet, white ceramic, a faded blue rim, and a single word grace. The letters had peeled, but I never scraped them off. I still used the wooden table Harold built, even if one leg wobbled slightly. I never sanded the initials under the corner. He'd carved them when we thought the world was simpler, HW plus PW. I touched them now and then. Not for memory, just for grounding. The scholarship application forms were stacked by the window. I'd already selected this quarter's recipient. Her name was Gloria, 54 years old, wanted to retrain in elder care. Her note simply read, "I want to help women like my mother before it's too late." I didn't reply. I just sent the check. Most mornings, I walk to the legal center. No one introduces me with titles. No one calls me someone's mother. Just Pauline Whitlow support staff. I make copies. I file papers. I clean out old folders and label new ones. The labels matter to me. They don't smudge. Natalie likes to leave sticky notes on my desk. Legend, one of them said last week, under a doodle of a cape and glasses. I don't wear glasses, but I kept the note. Sometimes someone calls and asks for Mrs. Hargrove. I say, "There's no one here by that name." Travis hasn't called in months. The last I heard, the court finalized the fraud case. He no longer owns any business license in the state. He lost his appeal. The papers said violation of fiduciary trust and elder exploitation. The terms sat heavy on the page, but not on me. I didn't read beyond the first paragraph. I'd already withdrawn from the estate before the hearing, sent in the notarized form to relinquish all familial assets involving his name. The courthouse clerk looked at me and said, "You sure?" I nodded and handed over the pen. Kimberly filed for legal separation 2 weeks after that. She kept the kids, moved out of state. The address wasn't forwarded. I didn't ask for it. He lives alone now, I think. Rents a basement studio somewhere in Kansas City. No car, no landline, no visitors listed on his building's records. The lawyer showed me once during a final status report. "Would you like to pursue restitution?" I shook my head. "I don't own anything." Travis can take any more. That's the most peaceful kind of wealth. This morning, I opened a small box at the bottom of my closet. Inside was the cloth I never finished embroidering. It was supposed to be a christening gift, then a birthday gift, then just a keepsake. Now it's folded carefully into the library's memory capsule. Labeled, "From a mother who once hoped." I didn't add a return address. The air shifted when the mail slot clicked. A single envelope fell on the mat. No stamp. Just handwriting slanted, unsure. The ink had bled slightly. Inside was a card with a drawing of 3 hands, 1 large, 2 small. Below it, I don't remember holidays, but I remember your hands. The ones that stitched my name in green thread. Signed Lila. I folded the card, placed it beside the kettle, beside the small calendar where I used to mark birthdays I no longer attend. I opened the top drawer and took out a thumbtack. The sketch Lila once drew, the one I had never displayed, now hangs on the far wall, just above the shelf where the tea sits. Her handwriting is still uneven, but the image is steady, clear. Someone once told me your value is in what you give. I used to believe that. I used to count every dinner served, every signature signed, every hour stayed awake waiting for their return. I don't count anymore. I give differently now. I give from surplus, not depletion. From clarity, not duty. That too is a kind of love. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't erase you. No one calls me to parties. No one asks me to sign checks. No one hands me papers and says, "Just trust me." And I do not sit at the end of a table clapping politely for people who erased me. I sip my tea slowly, letting the warmth settle in the space behind my ribs. I no longer wear my old ring. I left it at the county archive along with the deed to the house now held by the women's shelter. I wrote a small note on the back of the transfer form: a home should be safe. If not for me, then let it be safe for someone. No signature, no farewell, just a handprint drawn in pencil. Some nights I look out the window and remember the sound of Travis's voice when he said, "You're making things harder than they need to be." I don't hear it often anymore. It's quieter now, less sharp, like a pebble skipping its last bounce. I don't need anyone to call me Mom, or Grandma, or Mrs. I've learned the silence between names is enough, that a person can live well even unnamed so long as she names herself. I pour the last of the tea down the sink, rinse the cup, place it back on the shelf. I no longer hope they'll change. I no longer grieve what never was, because now I'm the one who writes my name into the life I chose.